So I'm gonna hit record. Done a few sessions before when that hasn't happened. So it's nice to get that done. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the webinar today, Marketing Foundations, where we're going to be looking at your 2026 marketing strategy and plan. As I mentioned before, just say for anyone joining now, my name is Matt Wilkinson, and I will be in the background today. If you've got any issues, questions, just use the Q&A or the chat, either is fine, and I will try and help you out, or I'll store up those questions for the end where we've got a Q&A session. We will be recording the session today, so we'll share that with you. And the slides, I guess that's fine as well if anyone wants to see those. And yeah, we'll send those to you by email afterwards. We really want your feedback, so any questions you've got, fire them in, and we'll either answer them in the chat or we'll have a Q&A session at the end. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jess from Clio to introduce today's session.
Hi guys, thanks for joining. So just a quick bit of background about why we've wanted to do this webinar. So I was at the Law Society of New South Wales for 11 years, and what I realised kind of engaging with practitioners is that, you know, whilst they were busy with the practice of law, sometimes the business of law was somewhat neglected, and I guess marketing your law firm and understanding how you can build up that client base and, you know, build a business as well as practice law always seemed to be, you know, an area needing improvement for practitioners. So when I came to Clio, when we partnered with Pillar and Scroll, it's something that I really wanted to do a piece on, to do a webinar on, just to help educate practitioners about law firm marketing, how they can build their business. And so yeah, that's what we're doing. And in session 2, I'm going to be quickly running through Clio Grow, which is Clio's client intake and CRM, which has specific features and functionality, which can help you build your referrals, plan your marketing strategy, plan your marketing budgets. And yeah, so I'll be touching base more in session 2. But for this session, Paul's going to lead. So over to him.
Thanks, Jess, and thanks, Matt. All right, we'll get stuck in. I'll introduce myself in a moment, but I thought I'd just start with a bit of an intro. And all right, okay. So firstly, I promise that this is the first time and the last time that you'll see scales in any of my images. I know how much of a cliche they are for lawyers, but in this instance, it makes sense. And what I want to kick off with first is, here's the situation, which is, as an industry, law firms have more demand, so legal work, than there is supply, which are private practice lawyers. So there's more work than there is lawyers to be able to do the work. And from all the research, I found this to be pretty consistent from practice area to practice area. It does vary, I guess, to the degree of that. And it also seems to be a pretty consistent theme outside of Australia as well. So there's more work than there is lawyers. I want to introduce you to Rosie. And not everything is rosy with Rosie. She's not getting her fair share of work, even though in reality, there's more demand than supply. Rosie's a really amazing lawyer. She's competitive when it comes to her pricing, but she's always worried about her pipeline of work. She doesn't love marketing, but knows that she needs to do something to make her practice thrive and not just survive. So she wants to grow, she wants more work, she wants better work, she wants to be able to charge higher prices. So how might Rosie do it? So how can Rosie grow a practice and get new clients? And that's what we're here to talk about today, is getting new clients. There's lots of ways you can grow, but today, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about how do you get new clients. And there's no shortage of options on how you can do that. And Rosie has her own ideas, and she's seen what other lawyers do. So other lawyers that might be maybe more well-known than her, and she sees what they're doing. She's been at presentations about marketing just like this, and she's even asked marketers, well, what should I be doing? And she's heard things like what's up on the screen right now, writing articles every week, or using an SEO agency, or going to networking events. And the problem with all of these ideas, especially in isolation, is that they're time consuming, or they're expensive, or even both. And in my experience, most lawyers don't want to do all this. There's no guarantee that these ideas will even work. So those activities are what I'd call doing marketing, doing things on hard mode. And doing so many things and trying to like tick all those boxes are a really good recipe for creating overwhelm and frustration. And I think most marketers give advice that is really looking at things that I would say are hard mode. When they ask you to go, okay, write an article every week, it just means more work. Or outsource the problem, it's more money. Or build your personal brand on social media, something a lot of lawyers don't want to do. And I don't think it's necessarily the best advice because it comes at a massive cost, and that's your time, your money, or both, as I said. The other side, which I think probably sounds like a strange problem, is that some of those activities can be actually really effective at getting leads. But the problem that getting so many leads is, well, now you have lawyers spending all their time filtering out through what's often like poor quality inquiries. And we hear that from our clients quite a bit when they first start with us is we've had all these leads, but they're all a bit rubbish. We spend so much time, we're losing lawyers because the lawyers are having to spend so much time just on the phone, just qualifying these prospects. And so I think that's really a way of doing things the hard way. So how do we do it on easy mode? And how can Rosie grow her practice in a much easier way? If we think about what the goal is of marketing, it's pretty simple. It's just have probably a surplus, I think is the best way to put it. So have more work, more great work, great clients, more than you can actually handle. And that's what this series is going to be about. So that's the promise, is to set you up with a way that you have a surplus of great work and great clients. And the answer to do it is actually pretty simple, but it's a bit nuanced, and that's what we're going to be covering over the next few weeks. So the answer is we focus on two things. If we get these two things right, we never want for work again. And these two things are the first being referrals. And that's the marketing activities that get the right kind of referrals from the right people coming to you. And the second part of this equation is conversations. And there are marketing activities that we can take that turn a referred prospect, so someone that's been referred in, and turn that prospect into a conversation. We know that when people reach out to a lawyer for conversations, that 9 times out of 10, they'll become a client. So who am I to tell you all of this? Well, my name's Paul Evans. I'm the CEO of a business called Pillar and Scroll. And the recommendations that I'm going to share with you today and over the next 3 weeks are based on lots of years of experience working with lawyers. So for 10 years, I started my career in a law firm as a marketing junior. By the end of that, I was heading up marketing teams for some of the fastest growing law firms in Australia. And for the last bit over 10 years, we've been running a marketing agency that just specializes in marketing for law firms. So as a result, we've worked with over 100 law firms, thousands of lawyers, and over the years, we've been exposed to and have done a lot of primary and secondary research into, well, how do buyers actually choose a new lawyer? Not how do we wish they did, but how do they actually choose a new lawyer? And I think from that experience, I think finally, like the thing where I think I can add a lot of value is actually understanding the challenges that lawyers have in marketing their practice. And the two big constraints or two big challenges are time and desire. So in 20 odd years, I'm still yet to meet a lawyer that says, I have an abundance of time, especially for marketing. And I don't think that's ever going to change. It's part of the model. Lawyers are the seller doers, is the term. They are responsible for selling the work. They're responsible for doing the work. So buying time is never going to be a solution. You can't outsource people doing the engagements. Time is always going to be a problem. It's going to be one of the biggest constraints. The other is desire. And that's, for most lawyers that I've worked with over the years, the most common sort of challenge is they don't want to do it. They want to be lawyers, not salespeople. They even say to me things like, I don't want to be an influencer. I don't want to become some personal branding guru who spends hours on TikTok and engagement and creating videos. Finally, some of them like, and I put this in the desire bucket, but it's, I don't know what to do. I'm not interested in learning. I don't want to know. And if you think about the most successful lawyers out there, whether that's big firms or specialist like boutique practices, have a think about the ones that are really killing it. And I would say very few are spending a lot of time or a lot of money on marketing. If I said 99 out of 100, I think I'd be shortchanging. I reckon it's more like 999 out of 1,000 and not influencers on social media. They're not spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on Google Ads or going to networking events every second night of the week. They don't have the time, they don't have the interest, but they're very successful. So what do they have in common? Referrals and conversations, building relationships with referrers and turning those referrals into conversations. And that's our strategy. And so we want to keep our strategy simple. We need to keep in mind when we're designing a strategy about those constraints. So the lack of time. Usually law firms have pretty small marketing budgets relative to other businesses. Usually there's not a lot of interest in marketing. It's not what they want to be doing. So we really want to focus on making this simple and focusing on these two core things. How do we get high quality referrals from others in a reliable way? And how do we convert those referrals into conversations? Because as I said before, if we get the conversation, most of the time that will turn into a client. So before we go into all the how, when we're thinking about strategy, we need to know where we're going. So the most simplest way of thinking about that is, well, where are we now and where do we want to get to? So this will be a very quick exercise. We're not going to spend some time on this. You can do this in your own time. It's that simple. But we're going to use revenue as a measure of growth. And there's plenty of other ways you can measure growth, but we'll use revenues as a marketing chat. And we want to think about this at like the individual or a practice level. We don't want to think about, if you're at a larger firm or something like that, you don't want to be thinking about these really big numbers. Just want to focus on you, your practice, and maybe if you have a small team. So we write down, okay, what's our annual revenue now? And then where do we want to get to? So we write down a number. There'll obviously be a gap, a difference, and we want to set a timeline. And this is just sort of a rough goal of what you're trying to achieve. Then what you want to do is break this down into some of the services you offer and think about your average file size. So you might have a few. So I've got 3 there, but think about what's the average file size in terms of dollars, and then how many files will you need to bridge that gap. And so it might look something like this for Rosie. Rosie's for annual revenues 1.5 mil, wants to make 2. within 12 months. So it's a gap of 500K. And then if you break down the services into sort of 50K service, a 20K service, and a 10K service, just averages, she needs about 25 clients a year to get to her goal. Not a huge number. If the number of clients you need is massive, and by massive, I'm talking about a few hundred clients, say, per year per lawyer, like you need to be adding sort of a few clients per day, then what we're going to talk about is probably not the right strategy for you. It can work at a firm level, this strategy, with those kind of numbers, but at an individual lawyer or a small team, this isn't going to work. And I would say you have a very different challenge if that's the case, because if you need that kind of volume, you're sort of looking at very different types of marketing and very different business models. I'd also say if you have a really aggressive goal, like trying to grow from 2 million to 10 million in revenue in 6 months, marketing isn't going to be the only thing you're going to need to do. You're going to need to recruit or massively increase your prices. But this is for organic growth. So the type of growth that you can do with your current team and the budgets that you're working with. So once we understand, okay, now where we are now and where we want to get to, we focus on the how. And that is quite literally the definition of strategy. It's how are we going to achieve our goal? And I like to add to it with how are we going to do it in the most efficient way possible? And so we come back to how do we do that in easy mode, referrals and conversations. So why referrals? Well, the first reason is that, and I mentioned this before, but it's actually the primary way that people choose a lawyer. We want to meet them the way that they are actually starting that process and going to choose a lawyer. This is how they do it. They ask someone. They also convert more than any other type of marketing. So by way of example, you need 10 leads probably from like a promotional type of marketing, say ads, SEO, speaking, whatever it might be, versus say 1 lead from a referral to get the same amount of work. And finally, and I think this is a contrarian take, but we're going to run through this in session 3, I've found them to be the most scalable and most reliable source of new work for lawyers. So let's first have a look at buyer behavior and how do people actually choose a new lawyer. So I'm going to run you through 3 really quick sort of stories. First is the story of Alison and Alex. So Alison's a dentist and she's been running a very successful dental practice in the Melbourne CBD for the past 8 years. And Alex is the co-founder of an IT services company that's growing rapidly each year. Things have been going well. Their net worth is just over $10 million and they've just bought their new forever home in the inner Melbourne suburb of Kew. Alex's COO at work has been talking to him and the COO recently lost his dad and mum in the last 18 months. And Alex has had front row seats to hearing all the ugly details about how the COO and their siblings went to court over how the estate was divided, and it was a mess. And so Alex and Alison want to make sure their kids never have to go through that when they both pass. They want the division to be clear, and they want to ensure their wealth goes evenly to them. Very important to them. The second story is about Alan. And Alan runs a moderately successful yogurt production company that's based in Sydney. And he's been running it for 35 years. Alan's tired and he wants to retire in the next 12 months. He's just received an email from a private equity firm that's just expressed interest in buying a majority stake or the whole thing and has asked him for an initial conversation. Now, over the years, Alan has anecdotally been told and heard that his business is valued somewhere between $3 and $12 million. So a pretty big difference. If he can sell his business for $3, he'll pay off his mortgage and it will set him up okay, for an okay retirement. It'll be nothing fancy, but it'll be okay. If he sells for 12, he gets his dream retirement and he can travel. He loves sailing and restoring vintage cars, so we have enough money to do that. And the final story is about Albie. And Albie was always a good kid at school. He had great marks, he was class captain, and even played for his state basketball team. But when he was 17, he witnessed a violent attack on his friend and he kind of went a bit off the rails as a result. A few weeks ago, he was arrested with a friend for stealing a car. And the problem is, this wasn't his first time he's been in trouble with the police. He was on probation, and his parents are worried that he might get a short prison sentence and they'll do whatever it takes to avoid it. The point of these stories is that when someone needs a lawyer, it's the most important thing happening in their life or business at that time. And when things are that important and the stakes are so high, whether they're perceived to be that high or real, well, what does everyone want? They want certainty. And certainty is really difficult for lawyers to provide. It's not like buying a product where if something goes wrong with the product, you can return it. You can't do that with legal services. It's a high stakes decision. And for most practices, there's rarely an undo button when it comes to legal services. So we take Alan, the food manufacturer who's about to sell his business. He wants the best possible deal. He gets one crack at it. He knows he needs a lawyer to help represent him on this deal. He's never bought or sold a business before. And the stakes are high, as I've said. So what does he do first? What is the first thing he does? Does he go on Google and search for an M&A lawyer in Sydney? Absolutely not. He calls someone. He asks for a referral. He calls his accountant, or maybe he calls another lawyer that he knows, or he's been a board member on an industry association, and maybe he calls someone on there who might know. And the research, and there's so much research on this, there's so many studies backs this, how people first seek a new lawyer. And this does vary from practice to practice, but all the studies tend to be in these kind of ranges, that 75 to 95% of work will come from referrals. 5 to 10 might come from generic Google searches like M&A lawyer Sydney, family lawyer Melbourne, criminal lawyer Brisbane. And then around 5 to 15% they'll remember the lawyer from, say, promotional marketing, whether it be like a presentation or from ads or those type of things, sponsorships. This is how people buy legal services, referrals. So why? Like, why do clients want it, and why are they great for lawyers? Well, for clients, it helps reduce uncertainty. They're going to someone that they trust usually. It'll usually be another professional. Contrary to popular belief, it's not usually existing former clients. It's usually other professionals. The other thing is there's so many options. There's so many messages out there, so much noise, and so much risk. So what do they believe? And is the best self-promoter the lawyer that can self-promote the best really the best lawyer? I also think it dilutes some of the emotional risk. So kind of shares the load a bit. It's like, well, if I ask someone, well, they told me to do it. Kind of unburdens them, like lets them off the hook a bit, rather than it being entirely their own choice. And I also think, at least from the client perspective, it might feel like Well, if I get a referral, it kind of puts a bit of pressure on the lawyer to perform. Like the lawyer won't want to upset their person that sent them to work. And why are referrals great for lawyers? Well, the prospects that come are more vetted by the referrer. They usually are less price sensitive, the types of prospects that come from a referral. And as I said before, and we're going to talk about this quite a bit more in session 3, but they are the most scalable. They require the least amount of effort and they become actually the most reliable when you have that right mix of referrers. But these days, a referral just gets you on the shortlist and doesn't always get you the conversation. Here's the reality of the digital era we live in. I'm going to share another brief story. It's the year 2001, and that's me as an 18-year-old, and I'm buying a car from the money I've saved from working at Red Rooster for $4.73 an hour for a few years. And it's the pre-internet era. So dial-up modems, like, when I say pre-internet, like of any substance, no one knows what Google is except a few techie types. And to get information about the car that I'm going to buy, I have to go to the car yard. And no one likes dealing with a salesperson, but it's the only way I can get information about what I'm going to buy. I have to go there to get the information. If we fast forward 20 years, this is me, married, 2 kids, living on a few acres. But the important bit is that how much the buyer behavior has completely changed. I go to the car sales, what is it called, car dealership. I've already made my decision. I go to the salesperson and go, I want that car. There's no, can you tell me about the 5 different cars? I know what I want before I've walked in. All the car salesperson has to do is get the contract ready. And in this digital era, and what buyers want is they want to reduce their uncertainty with information. And information is readily available now. And so how this trend comes back to how people buy legal services is in the analog era, before the internet, lawyers would go for a referral. The risks were still high then, still high now. They'd still get the referral. But they probably only got one, because the only way that they could evaluate, is this the right lawyer for me, was by talking to the lawyer. They talk to the lawyer, then they evaluate them, then they make the decision. But in a digital era, Alan's got information at his fingertips. And as such, Alan might get multiple referrals. So he might call 3 people and get 1 referral from each of them, or he might get 3 names from 1 referrer, whatever it is. But Alan can do his own research online. He doesn't need to go to the lawyer to get that information, like I had to go to the car yard to get the information. In today's digital era, most of that information gathering and decision making actually is done now online and anonymously. So when they come to you, when they come for that conversation, most of the time they've already made the decision to engage you. And that's why why we want to focus so much on how do we turn referrals into conversations. It works so much, just works so well. And again, the research backs this, is once someone has a referral, more than 95% of them, they do turn to Google, but they're not typing in M&A Lawyer Sydney, they're typing in the name of the lawyer or the firm name. Only a small number actually make direct contact. And so how do we ensure a referral turns into a conversation? Well, that's going to be the topic for most of next week's discussion. But it's how do we bridge that gap from being a referral to a conversation? It's really a question of, well, what information are they looking for to reduce uncertainty? And there's so much information you could give them. And this is the type of thing we're going to cover in session 2. But the big thing that they really want to know is quite simple. Has the lawyer done this before? Does the lawyer understand my specific context, and have they delivered successful outcomes within it? So if we think about Alan's story, what does he want to see on Rosie's profile? That she's done similar cases and gotten successful outcomes, completed a number of acquisitions, negotiated a sale for a similar type of business. If Rosie's a wills and estates lawyer, she's done work for high net worth couples. For Albie's parents, it's being able to keep kids out of jail. So how do we ensure referrals turn into a conversation? With evidence. We give them evidence. They don't do this. People don't do this. They don't search M&A Lawyer Sydney, but they absolutely search for the lawyer by name. So in next week's session, that's what we're going to be covering is how do we give ourselves the best shot for converting referrals into conversations? And we do that with our website, with the content in our website, with reviews. And then once they've reached out for a conversation or they're about to, how do we start that conversation from a place of strength? And we're going to talk a little bit about scheduling and that whole onboarding process. To go full circle, we're then going to be talking about referrals in session 3. So we're going to talk about, well, how do you attract good referrers and who are the best referrers? We're going to look at the trigger points as well. So what happens for someone to reach out to someone and ask, I need a lawyer for such and such? And then we're going to tie that to, well, how does that meet your growth goals? We're also going to cover, well, how do you attract more referrals? So we're going to look at a few different reciprocity strategies, which are really important for keeping referrals happening. We'll quickly touch on promotional marketing. So how can you use some of those tactics I did mention before, ever so lightly, just to make sure you're getting in front of the right referral sources? And how do you track those referral, the origin of those referrers? So that's it for today. I'm going to quickly pass over to Jess and Matt, and then I'm going to finish up with just one question I'd like you to think about before our session next week.
Hi guys, thanks for that. So that was some really interesting insights into how you can start laying the foundations for your marketing strategy. And this is probably more pertinent to to next week after I've done my presentation on Clio Grow. But if you ever want to reach out to me with any questions about Clio, then feel free, my email's there. And yeah, I'll speak to you all next week. Matt.
Thank you, Jess and Paul. I'm going to drop your email and the Clio website into the chat. A little bit about Pillar and Scroll. So we're a website and a marketing agency for law firms. Paul gave you the overview. Over a decade of experience within Pillar and Scroll, but Paul and the team have got a lot longer experience with law firms beyond that. And we work with leading firms in Australia and New Zealand. And what you get when you work with us, a lot of what Paul's been talking about, we're going to present your experience and expertise in the best possible light so that you're not that kind of best kept secret, which a lot of firms are. And doing that means you will convert more referrals into conversations. And on top of that, attracting prospects, referrers, and talent as well, right? We all need we all need good team members too. So if you want to up your marketing game in 2026 or websites for that matter, Paul would love to have a chat. I'm going to drop the details into the chat in just a second. And we also offer a free website review, which is really cool actually. But Paul and I worked on that. It takes less than 3 minutes, and you get a really good report on the good, bad, and ugly of your firm's website, and how to fix it as well, right? We don't just give you a kicking, if we'll actually give you some tips on what to do. So I'll put a link in the chat in a minute, but I'm gonna take some questions now. If you want to use the chat or Q&A to do those, I actually had a couple come in before the session with people who couldn't join. So I'm going to kick off with one of those, but chime in if you've got any questions. Paul's just going to wrap up there, and I'll give us a bit of time to post any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, before we jump in the Q&A, I just want to wrap up with something to think about before next week, and what's going to help with that the exercises next week is just have a think about your ideal clients and the types of matters that you like working on. So if you do that sort of growth goals of I want to hit this target, well, there were three kind of example, 3 file types maybe. You can have more than that, but what are the great ones? And that's going to be really useful in sort of framing up what we're going to talk about next week. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, happy to take questions.
Yeah, very good. I love that presentation. Thank you, Paul. So one of the questions we had come in beforehand was about a firm that does largely conveyancing work.
Okay.
And they were wondering whether that was something where people would actually research that. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've heard like this from conveyancers before, where they're like, it's pretty sort of routine work, and you know, it's not really that high stakes. It's fairly process driven. It's kind of a sure thing, and I think from my take on it is for most people that are buying and selling their home, it's like the biggest financial transaction that they'll ever make. So while it might not seem like high stakes for you, it's pretty high stakes for them. And I think they will do their online research. I don't think there's a question about it, but it's just what kind of information are they looking for? And they're not going to be really interested in like internal processes or culture or like the firm, that sort of stuff. But they're going to want to know, have you handled matters like this before? They probably also want to know things like timing, or have you handled these kind of issues, or even things like how easily contactable you are and are you local, pricing, those sort of things. So I think they will go online to answer the question. But yeah, next week we're going to talk about all the different types of evidence that you can provide, and it's going to depend. It's going to be contextual based on your practice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's always good in marketing to put yourself in the other person's shoes. We all become very accustomed with what we do if we do it every day. But like you say, it's a big deal selling your house. The first house I sold was negotiating over fridge freezer, probably $400, and the guy broke down in tears on the other end of the phone. So it definitely matters to people. One final question that's come in, unless anyone else has got one, was it's someone who does criminal law, so it's a very different, and they're getting a lot of work from Google Ads, but it's very expensive, and they focused on that quite a lot, and they're just asking like, who refers work to criminal lawyers?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, for certain practices, it's quite obvious. Criminal law is a bit trickier, but I think the most obvious one to me would be other lawyers. So lawyers probably in other practice areas. Um, and then you might have like community legal centres, community organisations, social workers, that type of thing. So we're going to be looking at in the third session, like the types of referrers that are likely to send you enough work to make this strategy work. But I think if we go back a step, it's like when someone's facing a criminal charge, who are they most likely to turn to first? And I think that's really going to give you a bit of insight. So something happens, then who do they ask? From there, like once you've identified who those type of people are, it's going to be as simple as like, how do you get in front of them? And how do you make sure that you're easy for them to remember and talk about when a good fit client comes across their path? But yeah, we'll cover, I think, a bit more of that in the third session.
Very good. Well, no more questions, and we've come up to the 40-minute mark. So We will send out an email with the recording and the slides, but great presentation, Paul. Thanks. Thank you, Jess. And thanks everyone for making time to come along. I know your time is precious, so thanks for making the time. And we look forward to hosting you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.